This is the last Sunday of our current Christian year. And traditionally, well, at least for the last 100 years anyway, the last Sunday has been known as Christ the King or Reign of Christ Sunday. So we hear a lot of language today around the kingship of Jesus. I just want to hang that for a minute. I'll come back to it. But before we go anywhere, I want to just unpack a little bit of John 18, the words that we're reading, because the word Jew comes up a lot. And it's passages like this in John that have led to centuries of animosity and anger and murder by Christians upon Jews. Because there is this assumption that modern Judaism are the people who killed Christ. So let's unpack that a little bit. First of all, they didn't have the political authority to do that. Crucifixion, killing for any political means by the state, that was only in the hands of the Romans. The Hebrew people at the time did not have that power. Secondly, you heard me use the word Hebrew because that's who the people were living in Jerusalem. The word that we translate into Jews is actually the word best used for Judeans. So we're talking about people who lived in Judea, maybe even Jerusalem itself, but in a very isolated way. And these are the people who were quite hostile to the teachings of Jesus. Now, not without reason, as we know through history, because the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the scribes were worried about what political upheaval would do to Rome, what it could bring Rome in on them. And by the year 1970, or not 19, by the year 70, that did happen. The temple was destroyed, and the Hebrew people were kicked out of Jerusalem. And the Gospel of John is written about 30 years after this happened. So tensions are still pretty high. There's also a notion that the Gospel of John was written to appease the Church of Rome, to make it more acceptable, that they wanted to make them pleasing. So the narrative was twigged a little bit to make it look like the Judeans were far more responsible for the death of Jesus than the Romans were. Even though politically that wasn't possible, it's not unheard of to, cook the story a little bit, to make the people you want to impress hear themselves in a more positive way, because there's no way you can read the Romans in a positive way in most of the Passion narrative. You just can't. They're ultimately the ones who killed Jesus for political reasons. So this is kind of what's going on in John 18. And we have this passage in the wider narrative of the Holy Week of the trial and crucifixion and resurrection. Normally, if this was back in the spring and it was Holy Week, we'd be preaching about this in the context of the wider picture, wider story of what happened to Jesus. But I will actually, for the first time, want to take things out of context and want to just look at the words specifically between Pilate and Jesus. So we know the setup here, we know what's going to happen, so we don't have to think about any of that. But Pilate, who doesn't, he had his ear to the ground. He was not a stupid political figure. He knew kind of what was going on. He wonders what the issue is with Jesus, why people are so angry with him. And they get really hung on this kingship idea, because kings were directly sanctioned by Rome. So if anybody claimed to have kingship or sovereignty that was not approved by Rome, there'd be huge trouble. So the people who wanted Jesus removed knew what to say to get him gone. And Jesus actually says that. Are you asking this because you're curious, or are you asking this because that's what they told you to ask me? Yeah, Jesus is never a slouch in this. He kind of knows what's what. And Pilate keeps going and he says, well, I'm not a Judean. Yeah, we know. You're going to be the ultimate murderer. And then he keeps asking Jesus, what is this all about? What is going on? And here is where I want us to pay attention. Pilate says, are you a king? And Jesus doesn't answer directly. He says, that is who you say I am. And I want us to take that apart a little bit this morning. Who do you say I am? It's a crucial part of Jesus' message. Part of the problem I have with calling this Sunday the Reign of Christ, or Christ the King Sunday, is the highlighting of royalty language. And we have to understand politically, 2,000 years ago, that was how it was done. Kings had power of life and death. They were all full of political intrigue. If they wanted something, they had a whole cadre of people who would make it happen. They were the ultimate power. They went to war against each other. They could bring peace to each other. They could take all the money from the peasant folks, leave them in poverty, or they could improve the peasant's life by giving them more options and more opportunity. Everything was done according to what the king wanted, what the sovereign wanted. It's a really, really powerful message of who the people saw Jesus as. Remember, we're just at the beginning of the 2nd century in the Common Era, where Rome still has a great deal of power. They have vast stretches of land that they're controlling. They have people traveling internationally all through the territory. The might of Rome is quite common for these folks. And these are folks that are under oppression. They're not politically independent. There's no such thing as democracy. They are living on the whim of whoever is politically in charge. And the imagery that comes out is this imagery of a new political leader, a new leader. That's the Messiah image that a lot of these people have carried for the past couple of hundred years. And Jesus has always said, that's not who I am. So why do we, thousands of years later, still hang on to this image of God as king, of Jesus as king, of the new kingdom, of the new realm? We are not a people that is under the rule of a monarch. In fact, most English speakers, especially if we're still in the Commonwealth, we have a figurehead, a royalty, and yeah, there's all sorts of archaic legal stuff that goes back and forth, but the reality is they don't have say over our day-to-day lives. We have whole different systems of how we're governed and how we actually contribute. So is the metaphor of Christ the King really that helpful anymore? I don't think it is. It makes me certainly uncomfortable because it doesn't get at it. See, the thing with making anything a monarchy or anything sovereign or putting anything on a pedestal is it creates distance, it creates a space. And Jesus tried during his entire ministry to shorten that space, to bring God to the people, so there would be a relationship, that God would be there walking with the people. Not removed, but we as humans have a tendency to want to put something up there to glorify it, and we keep putting it out of reach. So I want you to take a minute, just a couple of moments. Imagine Jesus was sitting with you, and you were the one that says, "Are you the king?" And Jesus responds, "That's who you say I am." Who else, what else do you think we could call Jesus? What would be a metaphor that would work today? Because if kingdom isn't that relative, if monarch is too far up, who is Jesus for us today? Who do we say Jesus is? Well, I know in my preaching, the word friend doesn't come up often enough. We've got grand titles: Savior, Conqueror, Eternal Life, Prince of Peace, huge titles. But we don't talk about the friend very much. Who do you say Jesus is? What if we started to create a world where we weren't looking at Jesus as royalty, as leader from on high, leader from a distance, but looked at Jesus in language that we would be comfortable with today, that would be a little more familiar and familial today? You know, is Jesus the one riding shotgun with you? Is Jesus your BFF? Bae, I don't even know if that's still in vogue. Is Jesus the person you want to turn to? Is Jesus your bestie? Is Jesus the one? Who do we say Jesus is? And on this eve of the new year, the new Christian year, it's so important to really figure out who it is we want Jesus to be, but that relationship we want to have as we go into this new year, as next week we start a time of waiting, where we might know how the story ends, but every year it's got this fresh newness. We're waiting for something new, something different in our relationship. But why don't we start that off with actually having a relationship with someone who is much more on our level, who isn't unattainable, who isn't glorified beyond all reason? See, Jesus came in human form for that relationship. If God was only interested in a relationship of distance, God didn't need to come as a baby. God didn't need to come incarnate. None of that needed to happen. The relationship from a distance still could have been there, but that's not the image that Jesus wanted us to have. Jesus wanted us to understand a compassionate, reasonable, responsible, respectful individual who was walking among us, who showed us a different way to do things that didn't involve a whole lot of hierarchy. The church likes to put hierarchy in place. It makes certain people feel comfortable, but it totally undermines the relationship Jesus wants to have with us and the relationship we have been asked to have with him. Who do we say Jesus is? Who do we want him to be in our lives this week, this season, this year? Who is that relationship? Who is the person? Are we so caught up in feelings of unworth that we don't pay attention to the fact that Jesus never said that? Never ever said that we were not worthy. In fact, spent a whole lot of time telling us that even the hairs on our heads are numbered. And that's how precious we are. Who do we say Jesus is? Spend some time thinking about this in this end of year. There's no right answer. It's what you need. And you know what? The relationship with Jesus, with the relationship with God that you might have needed 5 years ago was not necessarily the one you need today. And it might not be one you need 5 or 10 years from now. And that's okay. That's kind of the nature of relationship, right? It keeps changing. Focus on who you need Jesus to be and how to walk into this new year with that image in your mind as we go now to John the Baptist and Mary and Joseph and the shepherds and angels and the wise people looking for something, some new salvation, some way out of the world that they always knew, some promise from God to be there with the people. Who do you say Jesus is? Who do you want Jesus to be? Who do you need Jesus to be? I can't think of a better thing to come out of a Sunday that calls itself Reign of Christ, because we don't need the monarchy language. We have a relationship, and it is far better than putting Jesus on a pedestal and an unreachable. Who do you need Jesus to be? And spend some time meditating on that.